On this fifth week of Lent, we hear from the beautiful gospel according to St. John. And in it, we hear an encounter of some Greeks who meet Philip and ask Philip a very important question. They say, "Sir, we would like to see Jesus." And we see that Philip then went to Andrew, and Andrew and Philip together went to see Jesus. And then eventually Jesus did come to see those Greeks. But we see that our Lord imposed on them a wonderful statement, a wonderful proclamation. He said, "Unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains just a grain of wheat. But if it dies, it produces much fruit." You might wonder, what does that have to do, this grain of wheat, have to do with seeing Jesus? And in that, Father Lou's not the only one that can use props. I also brought one today, a sheaf of wheat. This is the product of one grain of wheat, one kernel of wheat that was placed in the ground, that was planted, that was fertilized, watered, and then grew, and that one grain of wheat produced an entire head, between 35 and 50 individual kernels of wheat. And our Lord uses this imagery and refers it to himself. For the purpose of a seed of wheat or any other kind of seed, is to reproduce, is to spread, is to grow. A seed of wheat needs to be taken out of the barn. It needs to be planted into the earth. It needs to be nurtured, cared for, water, fertilizer, and then lots of sunshine. And then that grain of wheat eventually, after a season of growth, becomes an entire stalk of wheat, becomes 50 more kernels of wheat. Certainly the purpose of a seed is to grow. The purpose of a seed is to be sacrificed. The seed is either, after it is harvested, the seed then can feed animals. It can feed human beings after it is ground and transformed into wheat. And the very luckiest of seeds is able to be ground into flour, and the flour that is used to make the hosts that are used at Mass, in which eventually and ultimately we can see Jesus. My brothers and sisters, that is the beauty of our Catholic faith. That in the midst of that faith, in the midst of our Lenten journey, in the midst of our lives, we are privileged not only to see Jesus, but to receive Jesus. To receive his body, blood, soul, and divinity into our bodies, to help us to grow, to help us to become holy, to help us to become sanctified, ultimately to help us to become divinized, to make us more and more like Christ. And then once we have received the Holy Eucharist, once we have gazed upon our Lord at Mass, gazed upon our Lord in Eucharistic adoration, then after we have received the Lord, then he gives us his strength. So then we can be sacrificed for others. We can be seeds for others that feed others, that strengthen others, that cares for and sanctifies others. My brothers and sisters, Jesus tells us we want to see him today. All we need to do is come to Mass. All we need to do is come to the Eucharistic Adoration Chapel at St. Malachy's, and we can gaze upon Jesus. We can gaze upon his holy presence and truly see him. Our eyes can feast upon him in the Adoration Chapel and at Mass. And then at the end of Mass, we are not only able to see Jesus, like the Greeks asked, we can receive him as our food, as the bread and wine transformed into his body and blood that has the power to transform us during this Lenten journey, so that we can die to ourselves and we can rise up and be food and love for others.